Hello, Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity, and today, not exactly a new topic. This is something we talked about at the beginning of the pandemic and all of the crazy testing and everybody running out. But one of the things that most people didn't understand is there's something called cycle threshold, and not cycle, even though psycho might have applied at certain times, but it's basically how much you amplifying this and turning the sound up. So if you crank an amplifier up, you're going to hear all kinds of little things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's music that you want to hear. So cycle threshold plays a big role in whether a positive COVID test was actually a positive test in somebody that you needed to, that was potentially infectious. And there's a lot of factors that go into to this whole mess and transmission and everything. And even years later, we still don't have all the answers. Before I do go into the result of this study, make sure you like this video, share it with somebody you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel. So that being said, cycle threshold is basically how much you're turning up the volume. The problem is most people were not aware of what the cycle threshold was set at for the testing that they were doing. Most of them were cranked up high to find minimal traces of the virus. So if you had a cycle threshold, let's say 40, did it really mean anything, or did it mean that you were maybe sick a month or a year ago, or maybe you got exposed to some virus but didn't actually cause anything? So this study looked at kind of answering that question, and it looked at specifically the Xpert Express test, and this was a test that checked for SARS-CoV-2, so for COVID, checked for RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, and for influenza. And what they did was 111 people that were tested. 88% of them were positive. So of those people, if they were positive, they checked an average of 2 days later to see if they were still positive. Only 40% of those people were still positive. So either things went down or maybe it was a false positive. Of those, so this is the 40% of the 88%, of those, only 33% were deemed actually infectious, so that they had enough viral material to cause an infection in somebody else. So this was 13 out of almost 98 or 38, 13 out of 98 people were actually infectious. It's a huge chunk of positives that really weren't going to do anything. And they determined that the cycle threshold was kind of cutoff was 26.3. Keep in mind, most of the test kits out there are far higher, and they're not really giving us information about whether somebody's infectious or not. And we based a lot of decisions on PCR testing without knowing what the cycle thresholds were. So, as always, I'll post a link to this particular study in the description. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.